What follows in chapter 40, and then we'll just have to wrap it up, and next week we'll pick up with chapter 41 and 42, is I would call it the children's board book theology of God, okay? If you have kids or grandkids, you know those books when they're very little that each page is kind of a hard cardboard page. I love those because even though they look thick, you can get through them in about 3 minutes. So there's only about 6 or 7 pages because they're so thick. But you know what they are. They're children's books with big pictures so that children can understand what you're talking about. Isaiah chapter 40 is commanding you to look at God, but how could you understand the incomparable? How could you comprehend the incomprehensible? And so what Isaiah is directed to do by God is to give you 4 great pictures, 4 pages in your child's theology book. And the 4 pictures show you how God cannot be compared to even the biggest stuff. All right? And now it starts over in chapter 40 in verse 12, and it goes down through verse 26. And I won't take the time to read it, but I hope you will. In verse 12, he compares God to creation. God is incomparable. Look at the biggest thing you know, creation, and it is nothing compared to your God. Next, verse 18, look at the idols that the world has constantly thrown itself before in this astonishingly ignorant, stupid dependence, this false hope that's touching if it weren't so tragic. Compare God to the idols. No comparison. Look at God and the great nations. Verse 21. We think of nations as impressive, like creation, or as the old world thought of idols. When you compare God to the great empires of earth, what are they? They're nothing. God is incomparably great. And finally, in verse 23, look at God compared to the great leaders of earth, the greatest men in history. What are they compared to God? They're nothing. And you come to the end of the chapter with this conclusion. I've been commanded to look for hope to God. He is coming as my shepherd and my warrior to save me. He is incomparable. That is. The pictures you're about to see of God in 42 through 53, you are looking at one that we can say honestly, there is no one like him. There is no one but him. And we're going to see that God is coming, not as we expect, but in the form of a servant. Well, we're glad you were able to join us this week for the podcast. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to The Whole Counsel on your favorite podcast app. And it does help whenever you're able to leave a comment or a question or write a review.